Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. This is season 9, episode 2, and it's so fun to be into the second episode of season 9 because this is Hanukkah week. And yesterday we had a wonderful conversation between Faith Kramer of 52 Shabbats and then Beth Lee of the Essential Jewish Baking Book. And I love getting a chance to talk to both of them. If you don't know, I had them at my library talking about the festival of Hanukkah and the foods of Hanukkah, and then we also used the same script for the podcast episode yesterday as well. So I had the pleasure of getting to talk to them twice in 1 week, which was really wonderful. I just love them both. They're so engaging. Beth is really fun and just a font of information and just so charming. It's great to get a chance to talk to her. I just love having an excuse to have people back on the program, and having them both talking together was just a treasure, and it really made my week. I also love getting the chance to have Hanukkah week and get to have some of my guests' episodes rebroadcasted like I'm doing with this one. I'm going to take you right to my conversation with Beth Lee of the website Oh My God Yummy, or OMG Yummy, and the Essential Jewish Baking Book. You can get that at all better bookstores, but we also have a link to the cookbook and her website in the bio. Check that out. Onward to the episode. Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. Today, I'm honored to have Beth A. Lee on my podcast to talk about her brand new cookbook, the Essential Jewish Baking Cookbook, 50 Traditional Recipes for Every Occasion. Beth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dean. I'm so excited to be here chatting with you.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to it, and I've been looking over the cookbook and it making me very hungry. I've been looking over it with my wife, and we've been planning out all the things I want to bake in the future with it. So it's going to be kind of fun.
Great. Well, let me know what you decide to start with. And I love seeing what everybody's cooking and baking and their twists on it, or just how it's just really exciting to see it all see it coming to life and people eating it in their kitchens.
Well, I'm on a rye bread kick right now, so there'll be a lot of rye bread in my future from this book. But I really like a lot of the cookies, and I think some of the recipes, like I wonder if I'm pronouncing this right, Hamantashen.
Hamantashen.
Hamantashen, yeah. Well, that's a lifelong favorite of mine. So those will be first, I'm sure. But also, I want to try the rugelach.
That's a good one. That's the recipe that we've been making in our family for a really long time. It started out years and years ago, like so old that it was in a magazine, and I'm afraid to say when because it really dates me, but it was a recipe we had found in Food and Wine like a million years ago, and then just have kind of made it into our family recipe over the years. But it's a really good one we're asked to bring that really wherever we go. We eat it for Hanukkah, even though that's not really traditional. It's just traditional for us.
Yeah.
But there's something about the combination of the chocolate and the apricot and the cream cheese and butter in the dough and sour cream. You just kind of can't go wrong with it.
I'm salivating just thinking about it. That's all my favorites right there. So tell us about yourself, for those who are not familiar with you or your website. Tell us about yourself and how you came to food writing.
Sure. So not a typical path. I kind of call myself a recovering Silicon Valley marketing executive, as so many people end up being here, the recovering part. But I love to savory cook, especially really from college on. And I had this long career in doing, as I say, Silicon Valley stuff, but I always had this sort of yen for cooking. I just perhaps realized late just how much of a yen for cooking I had. And then in 2010, I had to take a little break from my regular work to deal with, managing the household and the kids and stuff. And I was really antsy, and our family loves traveling. When we traveled, we would always travel and kind of plan our food, and then the sort of the sightseeing was in between. And I was just kind of seeing a pattern there. And at 2010, my family said, why don't you just start writing about food? just like start a blog. Like, why not? It was sort of on a whim, without all the planning and everything that I had to do for, my clients and everything in marketing. And I started writing my food blog, Oh My God Yummy, omgyummy.com. And it really just has gone on from there. I realized, that really food, everything about food, writing about it, eating it, creating recipes, taking photos of it, I realized that it's my passion. And I just decided to keep moving forward with it. And I will tell you, I think you'll appreciate this. In 2010, the year I started my blog, I went to a blogging conference in San Francisco. I think it was Blogger Food. And I met Dory Greenspan. I met a lot of people who I'm still friends with. It wasn't just her, but I remembered meeting her and I knew she was, already really well known in the food writing and cookbook writing field. And she was so wonderful, genuine, and
Yes.
inspiring when I met her. That I just thought, wow, like if this is what the world of food professionals is like, this is the place for me. I mean, she just, and a lot of other people I met at that conference, I'm still in, contact with and working with or friends with. It was very inspiring. And I just decided to keep moving forward with it. Wasn't, as I say, there wasn't really the plan, but I just realized it was my passion and I was going to keep marching forward.
Dory is probably one of the nicest people on the entire earth. I swear to God.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very excited. Anytime that I converse with her, I'm just always, I love her writing and I love the way she connects with people. And no matter how, well-known or widespread her work is, she really connects with people at the same level that she always has. And it's just really inspiring.
When I interviewed her a few weeks ago, I think she asked me more questions than I asked her.
I actually do. I want to know. I was thinking about that before I call. I do want to know more about you. And I love the name of your podcast, The Well-Seasoned Librarian. So I do want to know more about that. And it's true. When you talk with her, she's just really, I feel like she sincerely wants to know about you and connect together, not just have the conversation and move on to the next thing.
I know. I mean, I was going to almost suggest to her that she have her own podcast because she's really good at it.
Yeah. Well, she's doing that newsletter, which is really, and I was just like gobsmacked when she included my book in her newsletter as one of her for A through L. She did 2 newsletters, A through L, and then M through Z of the books that she's, looking at right now, reading right now, cooking from right now. And I just was so thrilled to be in that list. That was just amazing. Well, talk about like coming full circle with my foray into the food world. I felt just so, I think it's overused, but honored and just thrilled, just completely thrilled that she did that.
Well, your website, OMG Yummy, is no small potatoes. It's, I think, that one of the sleekest, most well-produced websites I've seen on food writing around. And I think it's kind of one to hold up to standard for other, people. If you wanted to make your own website and blog, I think that would be the one to look at to kind of take note.
Thank you so much, Dean. I mean, that's my, the cookbook has been wonderful, and it was definitely a dream and a goal for me. I knew that I wanted to be able to start, putting my perspective and my food into physical cookbooks, because no matter how advanced the online world gets, people still love having that, a physical cookbook in their hands or reading them like stories. But the blog is really what got me, launched into the food world and has forced me to really, I sometimes say, get an MBA in social media. At least another degree, because it just forces you to stay extremely current with what's going on, and it seriously changes all the time. But I've become an SEO expert. I just completely redesigned the blog. Was it early 2020? I think maybe right around when all the craziness started with lockdown and pandemic, but I was did a whole entire redesign to focus on not only the look of it, a new, new logo and all of that, but also really what allows people to find your blog these days. You have to learn search engine optimization, what they call SEO. And so I've had to learn that. Luckily, I'm in a fantastic mastermind group that helps me. We all help each other stay current, but thank you for noticing. And I do work really hard on, if you look back at early posts, you'll see my photography was sort of horrendous at the beginning, and slowly but surely I'm trying to get rid of all that. But the more current work is, I've learned that I love photography. I love to be in front of the camera too. I'm hoping to do more and more video, either for myself or with brands. But I learned that I love to be behind the camera and take photos of food. And it's one thing, by the way, I loved about this change in career for me is in my previous career, I hired creative people and I managed big projects and product launches and all those things. But I didn't think of myself as a creative person. I thought of myself as the person who's really organized and does project management. And what this field has taught me is that I'm a creative person. I'm a writer, I'm a photographer, I'm a recipe creator. And it's been really exciting to me to gain the confidence and to do that. And I realized how important, it would have really been sad if I went through my whole life and didn't think of myself as a creative, but only someone who hired creatives. I realized I'm a creative person too. So.
I'm surprised you say that, because you're really good at photography. And I didn't really actually check to see who did the book's work, but I was talking to Rose Levy-Berenbaum yesterday about it and your cookbook. And she said your design for the cover, everything was just really amazing. And she was talking about how good it was. And I was noticing as well how great your photography is for your social media work. It's just really excellent.
Thank you. Well, the photography for the book was done by Annie Martin. I want to give her a huge shout out. That was the choice from the publisher, Rockridge Press. And she did just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work. I had so wished there were even way more photographs, because she just did a fantastic job. I sent them, little snapshots that I took all the way through my recipe development, so they would know this is what it's supposed to look like. But they baked it, they photographed it, and wow, what a beautiful job they did. And to your point, Dean, it's really interesting because I photograph a lot. There's a lot of different food on my blog, as I'm sure you noticed. I love Middle Eastern ingredients and cuisines. I love a lot of fresh produce and fresh fruits, and very eclectic, all kinds of food. There's Hawaiian influenced food. So I don't only photograph baked goods, but when you start thinking about photographing baked goods, you realize how much brown there is.
Yes, yes.
So,
absolutely.
So it takes a lot of skill to really make the picture work and be exciting. And I've, but over the years, I'm so impressed with what Annie did for the book, and people love the cover design also by the designers at Rockridge Press, just that really the swath of blue. And then that, that babka right there, people are really loving the cover design. And, I'm thrilled with how it came out. And on my blog, I look back at my original work from 2010, maybe 2010, 2013, when I was just playing around and didn't really know what great food photography was, kept going to, session after session to learn. And now, I feel like, I'm a food photographer. I can say that about myself. Absolutely. With confidence.
Yes, very much. I totally agree.
Thanks for noticing.
Now, I want to ask you, I was doing some research on you for the interview, and I saw something that you were mentioned in a 2013 article, The Popularity of Jerusalem by Yotam Ottolenghi and Sami Tamimi. How did this come about?
Sure. So that's a really proud and exciting time in my last, I guess it's almost 11 years in the food world. So a good friend of mine who I've actually was my first friend when I moved to California, Serene Wallace. I've known her since sixth grade. She was actually in the food business long before I was. She was a newspaper writer. She had a food columnist she had a food column called Fringe Food, or Food on the Fringe. She used to write about ingredients that, were maybe people didn't know about. She would, teach you all about the ingredient and then give you a recipe. So, you could practice using it. Anyhow, we were very excited when we saw that the Jerusalem Cookbook by Ottolenghi and Tamimi came out in, I guess it was the beginning of 2013 or late 2012. We kind of had a quick conversation on Twitter, and just to come back to Dory Greenspan a little bit, has had groups who cooked through her cookbooks, like French Fridays with Dory. And actually, you'll find a bunch of posts on my blog because I was part of that group. And it's such a wonderful thing and she was so supportive of it. But it was so wonderful to cook through a cookbook with all these other people and talk about what you did with it, with the recipe, ask questions. So this friend of mine, Serene, and I decided we were so excited about the Jerusalem Cookbook coming out that we were going to start our own kind of group and called Tasting Jerusalem. And it's we still have a group a very active group on Facebook these days, but it all started on Twitter. We're like, should we do something? Like, this is exciting. The ingredients are exciting. We both love, those Middle Eastern ingredients from all different cuisines. Should we do this? And we just decided, we were going to give it a go. And we launched it by doing this Skype cook together with each other, because she's in Southern California, got covered in the newspaper down there, got covered in a couple other places. Alex Wall from the Jewish News of Northern California wrote a story about it. And somehow I forget exactly how, the New York Times heard about it. They were doing a whole huge, Julia Moskin was doing a big spread in her column about one of the recipes and about the book. And they called us. The New York Times called Serene and I and said, we want to talk about your group. Everybody's so excited about this cookbook. You started this virtual group. Can we write about it? And can we come to your kitchen and take photographs of you making food from the book? Of course we said yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was the one that came to my kitchen. And so, yeah, I'll forever be in that big spread about the launch of the Jerusalem Cookbook and all the Ottolenghi effect, as people say. I mean, look what's happened to him since then. And Sami Tamimi, if you're not familiar with the book he came out with, I think last year, called Phalistin, which is about Palestinian cooking. And he came out with that with Tara Wigley. Amazing recipes, amazing book. And I don't need to say more about Ottolenghi. I've met Yotam at Omnivore Books in San Francisco and a couple other times. And he's, was very appreciative of everything we've done with teaching people about the ingredients in the book. And that's, by the way, how we focused our group, was on the ingredients, because people will be like, well, what's sumac? What's za'atar? How do I find it? So we would have an ingredient of the month. And then we talk about all the recipes in the book that use that ingredient. And we've kind of keep with that a little bit. In a couple of his recent books, he's used an ingredient called rose harissa. And people actually complained a little bit in a fun way, like, what the hell is that? Where do I find it? How do I get it? I have a post on my blog. Serene and I came up with a recipe for rose harissa that you can make it yourself, because it's hard to find. And then I also linked to the very few places that you can actually find the ingredients. So we laughed about that the last time I saw him in person. We joked about that a little bit, but that's how that came about. It was sort of, it just sort of happened in the groundswell of all the excitement for the cookbook. And it was very exciting time. And it was very exciting to have a New York Times photographer in my kitchen. I'll never forget that.
Now, was the Essential Jewish Baking Cookbook a long time in coming, or did you just one day think, you know what, I'm gonna write this cookbook? How did it come about?
Great question. So it came about really quickly. I had been thinking and have been playing around with several different ideas for cookbooks. And going in the direction of doing something Jewish is a pretty obvious fit. But as you may have noticed on my blog, I write about a lot more than just Jewish baking and
Right.
cooking. So I could go a lot of directions with a cookbook, but I was actually approached by the publisher last December. As Alex Wall said in her article about me, was it a COVID project? And so it kind of was, because they approached me last December. I agreed to do the project with them in early January. I started in mid-January, and I turned in the manuscript in like late March, early April, and then we edited. So it was a really fast project. But when they brought it to me and said, do you want to do this? I thought about it really hard and did a lot of due diligence and thinking, but it honestly was a perfect fit for me. Like it was just such a good fit for me to, it's so important to me personally to pass on the culture and the food of my family. Also my husband's family. He was not raised Jewish. He was raised in the United States, but his parents are from Hawaii and his grandparents were from Korea. So that's where some of that Hawaiian and Korean food you might see on my blog comes from. But it's really important to me to pass on those traditions since I have a multicultural family. So the idea of doing essential Jewish baking, where I can really honor the bakers of the past. And there's a friend of mine on Instagram who said this so nicely, that my book honors the bakers of the past, but welcomes the new bakers. And I see it happening. I see people who are just new to baking, who are diving in and having success. So it just seems so right for me to be able to put my mark on a book that's going to hopefully live and help people pass on their own traditions. And it was so great because I'm of Ashkenazic descent. So
Right.
my lineage is from Eastern Europe, but there are Jews from all over the world. The diaspora is wide. We covered the Sephardic baking and also some Mizrahi baking, Sephardic being primarily from like the Greece and Spain region, although it's a little more complicated than that. And then Mizrahi, meaning the Jews of like Middle Eastern, Arabic descent, maybe some Asian descent. There's also crossover, but we really tried to cover a broad base. And anyhow, it just felt like a good fit to me. And timing was good. We were still all home in our houses, and basically just dropped everything and dove into it. And I'm so happy I did.
Did you have any fears when you're writing it that somebody might contest some of the recipes as not authentic enough or not how my grandmother did it?
Well, first, that's a good question. I didn't really have fears that people would, contest it. I had a lot of trepidation about how I was going to get smart enough and knowledgeable enough to represent recipes that maybe I didn't grow up with and do a good job of it. So maybe I wasn't afraid, but it was really important to me that I did the legwork to do it properly. So for example, I didn't grow up eating Sephardic baked goods like the burekas or the bizcochos. Or there's some rolls in there called raskas. But I happen to know people who did grow up and have family still alive that bake all those things. So I spent quite a bit of time one-on-one with people. I mean, I have text conversations, like when I was developing the Roscus, literally texting with my friends who do know how to make those. Then they were one of my recipe testers. I also went into Facebook groups, both broadly like Jewish cooking that cover all different kinds, but also specifically Sephardic groups like Bendijas Manos, and I think there's another one, Sephardic SEC Spice or something. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I spent a lot of time in those groups saying what is essential Jewish baking to you. Plus, I'm also fairly well schooled in Middle Eastern cuisines and ingredients, so I had some little bit of comfort with some of the more Mizrahi based, the pita bread, but I do a lot of learning. So I did the research. I had a lot of cookbooks, a lot of, live resource people, a lot of research on Facebook and really in Facebook groups. And, and then I would do, I would do spreadsheets with different recipes in them and study like what it, and watch YouTube videos. There's one recipe in there, malawach, which is a Yemenite flatbread.
Right.
I had never made that before. I watched so many YouTube videos. Everybody makes it differently, but you start getting a sense of what makes it malawach. And then I would kind of go from there. And I would always try to think about, it was really important in this book, so essential Jewish baking. We wanted it to be kind of those recipes your grandma, might have made when you were growing up, if that was your background. We also wanted it to be comfortable for people newer to Jewish baking. Maybe you're not even Jewish, you just love a bagel, or you have a friend who's Jewish, you want to cook for them. So I also tried to keep ingredients something you could buy at the local grocery store, and really try to keep the recipes approachable. Even if they were a little more complicated, try to really keep the directions and the ingredients and the processes as approachable as possible.
Well, you did a great job on that, because it's a really wonderful, well-written cookbook. I really was impressed, with a lot of the recipes and how you made them really accessible for people that might not be familiar with it.
And I've gotten some good feedback. In fact, I'll use my niece as an example. She really wanted to make barakis for her husband, who's from Israel, and he was having a yen for him, but she does not consider herself a baker, really never makes dough from scratch or whatever. And that she's made them now 3 or 4 times. And in fact, last night I got another text from them on our little thread saying that they had just made them for like the 4th time. And I have a friend who's not Jewish, not a baker at all, and she made the babka. And so I'm feeling really good that I'm connecting with people who are just excited to have a way to learn to bake, whether they're Jewish or not, like to feel like they have the tools to get in the kitchen and try it.
Now, speaking of babka, are you in on the recent pumpkin spice babka controversy?
No, tell me about it, Dean. I did not hear about this.
So
how did I miss it?
I saw that this morning on Twitter. I guess somebody posted a recipe for pumpkin spice babka, and I guess the internet went berserk, and a lot of people are like very much against it. Some people are like, it's just, don't worry about it, it's no big deal. And everybody's kind of feuding on it right now.
So because it's not traditional,
right?
Or, yeah. As I said, I stuck with traditional in the book because that was the essence of the book. But I think part of the beauty of cooking is the creativity, and you can change. You can change flavors and things and still give a nod to the essence of what it is. Babka is this enriched dough with butter and eggs in it, that's rolled and has a filling in it. And I think you can, I'm not personally offended by things like that at all. I think there's something about pumpkin spice. People are either big fans or not. It seems to bring out seems to bring out the edge in some people. I said on one of my Instagram posts the other day, I asked people, what are they getting excited about for fall? And I said, if it is pumpkin spice, this is a safe place. You can say that. It's okay.
Yeah, it does seem to be a big controversy, though. It's funny to me to watch because I don't see why, but people really seem divided on it. I don't know why. Now,
I'll have to look it up.
I saw in your bio that you're from the East Coast. How did you come to move out to the Bay Area?
So my parents are both from the East Coast originally, both born in New York. My dad was an only child, but my mom was one of 6 kids, and she was sort of in a way, the black sheep of the family, because she actually left New York, the New York, New Jersey area, because of my dad's work. They ended up in Schenectady, and then we ended up in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which is Western Massachusetts, as people might know, at the heart of the Berkshires. And that's where I was raised, because there was this huge GE footprint there. There were various GE businesses, and my dad worked for GE. So we lived in Pittsfield for a long time, but then my dad got promoted to be the head of the field office at Lockheed Missiles and Space, which is in Sunnyvale, California. And he took the job. And we left. Everyone else stayed East Coast. We picked up and drove across the country and came out to California. And myself and my 3 brothers and my parents, who are still alive, my mom's almost 92, my dad's 94, we all stayed in California, and we've been here. So I've been here ever since. And it's a far cry from the Western Massachusetts or Brooklyn, where a lot of my family was, or New Jersey or Florida. But we made a home here. We love we love it out here. Sometimes a little bit, it's getting better. It used to be really hard to find sort of the Jewish food I grew up with. It's getting a little bit easier, but it used to be really hard. But we love it out here.
Now, did somebody inspire you to bake, or did you kind of come to it on your own?
No, so I do talk about it in the book. So it was really my grandma who inspired me to bake. She was a prolific baker, as my mother still tells me almost every time that I see her. But interestingly enough, and this is something I learned when I started writing my blog, and it was part of what really pushed me forward to keep documenting recipes and learning to bake and cook better and better and better. My grandmother is a prolific baker, 6 children, none of them baked.
Oh.
None of them. It skipped an entire generation. And I think it was because that there were 4 girls. There were 6 kids, 4 girls. At that time, it was rare that the men would bake, but not even the women baked. They cooked, they didn't bake. And I think it was because of the time, like late 50s, early 60s, the whole like convenience foods became popular, frozen foods, all those things. And it suddenly wasn't such a great thing to spend time making stuff from scratch in the kitchen. So anyhow, I kind of came to this epiphany that I didn't want it to kind of just disappear. I mean, when I hear my mom and her sisters, when they were still alive, talk about what my grandmother did, I was like, I don't want that to go away. And she did not write any of her recipes down. She did it all just out of feel. So I kind of wrote down her challah recipe, and I kind of wrote down her hamantaschen recipe, but it really took me a long time to get up the confidence to start figuring out what those recipes really were, and to grow my, the number of recipes that I created that would sort of, carry on the tradition. So really, I didn't want I didn't want her knowledge of baking and her prowess to just disappear. So that's, I think, my biggest motivation, especially on the baking side.
Was there anything your grandmother cooked that you especially loved?
Well, it's really the challah, and I talk about that in the book. There's the Bubby's challah. I mean, she cooked savory things, but that isn't really what we all remember. What I remember was showing up at her tiny apartment in Brooklyn on a Friday night after driving there from Massachusetts, and she would have challah waiting for us on the table.
Oh,
And so that was really, and to me that, and she also used to come to our house in Pittsfield in the summers when I was much younger, and she would bake for us there. She would bake the hamantaschen, and she would take the extra scraps of dough from the hamantaschen that wasn't enough left to fill, and just make little cookies out of it. And it sounds so simple, but it's one of those things you just remember. It's like a
yeah,
flavor memory from your childhood.
yeah.
So when I kind of figured out her hamantaschen recipe and took those little scraps and baked them, and they tasted like what I remembered, that, those flavor memories are so important to us. I think they just are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So those are, I think, the challah, her challah and her hamantaschen dough really had a big impact. Now I know she used to bake way more than that when I wasn't alive yet, but those are the recipes that stood out for me.
What kind of fillings did she do for the hamantaschen?
She did pretty traditional prune filling.
I love
You know
that. Oh
what
my
they
God.
might be, people might recognize as lekvar. And
Hmm.
so I actually there's a prune filling in the book, and I love that. A lot of people like poppy seed filling. We also show lots of, and I suggest using all kinds of jams. Not only does it make the hamantaschen look beautiful, but really you can go any direction with the filling. You can go, the Nutella chocolate route, but the traditional ones are poppy seed and prune. She was kind of a prune baker, a prune filler.
I think it drives me nuts because I like prunes and I like using them in baking, and people get so weird about them because they have this weird block in their brain about it. But I really like them. I don't know why so many people don't really choose to use them more often.
Yeah, I think it's an underappreciated fruit and
Absolutely.
flavor. I agree
Yeah.
with you.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. Can you tell us some of the methods and techniques that differentiate kosher baking?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a reveal here. I don't keep a kosher household, but I had to learn about it for the book. And I actually had to write a whole sidebar about it, and happen to have a cousin who does keep a very strict kosher household. So I learned a ton. And so, kosher baking depends on the kind of kosher household you keep. If you keep a kosher household from, a completely kosher, then you're going to be using, the types of, which uh, um, um, uh, utensils and which oven you use are going to make a difference in your kitchen. Like you're not going to put meat dishes in the same oven that you might put your dairy dish or recipes, something you're making as your dairy. But there's other levels of kosher baking. So it's also which ingredients you choose to use. And you can look at the labels of ingredients in the store to find out if they're considered pariv, or which means no dairy, no meat, or if they're considered to be dairy, if they're kosher approved. And then the other level is just what you're serving it with. Like, you can make like a babka, has eggs and dairy in it because it has butter in it. You're not going to serve it with a meat meal if you're keeping a kosher house. But so you might have used kosher approved ingredients, but you can't serve the milk with the meat. So there's kind of different levels, and it depends on how, whether you keep a kosher household or you're just trying to serve something at an event that is considered kosher. So I go through a whole sidebar explaining that I am not an expert on setting up a complete kosher household, but I do give, a brief background on it. I do talk about what you can look for in the ingredients. So for example, in the book, I make a marble loaf cake. And I do suggest using almond milk in it. Because I want and olive oil, because I wanted it to be something that you could absolutely serve whether you keep a full kosher household or not, because there's olive oil in it, not butter, and it's almond milk, so it's a non-dairy milk and not a dairy milk. So anyhow, there's lots of alternatives in the book, and I try to point out when something is considered kosher or ways you might be able to make it kosher. But yeah, it's a kind of multi-level answer to your question. There's different levels of keeping kosher, I guess, in my mind.
I was really happy to see you had a recipe for kugel in there, because it's something that I really love. I had some at a potluck once, and I think I made a pig of myself. I almost ate it all because I loved it so much. And I really wish more people were aware of it as a dish, because it's really beautiful, and it is something that I think if more people made it, they would really start using it in their repertoire.
So what kind of kugels have you eaten? Like, have you eaten a dairy-based kugel or a
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
it was
that's
cottage cheese based.
Yeah, so the recipe in the book, there's actually two. There's a savory kugel that's appropriate for Passover, and then there's the dairy kugel. That recipe originally came from my friend Dana Schrager, who she has a blog, Foodie Goes Healthy, but she also runs the Jewish cooking and a Jewish holiday cooking group on Facebook. And kugel's an interesting thing because it's almost kind of a very peasanty food, casserole-ish, but it can be so delicious, so comforting. I actually grew up in a family, we didn't put dairy in the kugel. My mother stopped keeping a kosher household, but she grew up in one. And so she learned to make a kugel that had no dairy in it. So you could eat it like with your Friday night Shabbat meal, which would generally have like a chicken or a brisket or some kind of meat main course. Hence, you could not eat dairy with it. So I grew up eating this really simple kugel with egg noodles and raisins and olive oil and eggs and cinnamon. And that was just about it. And the raisins would get kind of crispy on the top, and the edge of the noodles would get crispy. And I just loved it, but it was so basic and simple. And I thought people love dairy kugels. So I really wanted to put something in the book that would give them the option for the dairy kugel.
What a nice compliment to any meat too, the more savory one, like you mentioned, because it is, like I said, such a great dish, and I think that more people should give it a shot. Definitely get your cookbook and give it a shot, because it's nice to try both of them, because the more desserty one is nice too in its own right.
Right. And it's a lot of people like to serve it when they break the fast after Yom Kippur, which is usually a dairy meal. And you could make a kugel ahead of time. You're not supposed to cook on the day of Yom Kippur. So right. You can make it ahead and then serve it as part of your dairy break the fast meal. And people love that.
So as a fellow Bay Area resident, can we talk a little bit about some of your favorite restaurants and places to go to in the Bay Area for food?
Well, so yes. I feel like I don't get out much these days.
Oh yeah, I know this feeling.
So and I live in the more southern part of the Bay Area. I think some of the hottest probably restaurants are more in the Oakland area and San Francisco. So I'm probably not your leading expert, but I think if somebody were coming to the Bay Area or would be deciding to venture out, I think I would definitely look at Oakland and San Francisco, especially Oakland, but there's some exciting stuff happening in the South Bay. There's some nice restaurants popping up in the Campbell area. Down in my area, boy, if you want to eat Vietnamese food, we have just probably, I think we have one of the biggest populations in the whole country, and every type of Vietnamese dish you can possibly think of. And from what some of my husband's friends who are Vietnamese, they sometimes think the version of it here may be even better than what they remembered from, being in Vietnam, although the food there is amazing too. In any case, I think there's a lot of, not necessarily like, the restaurants being written up in, whatever the fancy, and reviewed, but there's amazing Vietnamese food down here. There's some fun restaurants popping up and have been in the Los Gatos area, which is kind of right near the Santa Cruz Mountains before you drive over. There's some good stuff happening, like David Kinch, who has Manresa and in Los Gatos, he opened up a pizza place, very casual, over the hill in Aptos. And so, but if you're asking me, where do I go out all the time? I mean, I've been a little hermit-like over the last year and a half. There's also been, a lot more, I had mentioned, there's a lot more Jewish food and also Israeli food, that restaurants with Israeli food or specific cuisines, Palestinian food, popping up more so in the Oakland and San Francisco area. But there is a place in Sunnyvale to get falafel that many people may not know about, called Falafel Stop. And if you want to eat fantastic falafel and be temporarily transported to Israel, that's the place to go. Just a little hole in the wall. In fact, little story, I went to high school pretty much across the street from where it is. It used to be a fast food place that everyone at lunch at my high school would go to. Now it's this place called Falafel Stop, and it's amazing. Really fantastic. Basically a hole in the wall. Highly recommend driving down for it. It's terrific.
I think we could even say that Israeli food is becoming one of the biggest food trends in the Bay Area right now.
I think Israeli food and, as I say, like specific cuisines from that region, Lebanese, Turkish, Palestinian. I can't think of the name. There's a great restaurant. I'm blanking on the name, but anyhow, I think if you're looking for cuisines to eat, I mean, and that's the other thing about the Bay Area. I mean, really, you can find almost anything.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. You could find Russian food, Peruvian food. I mean, you can just find just about anything, and hopefully most of the places have survived. And there's I've seen some new things opening up. So let's keep our fingers crossed that, the restaurant scene continues to flourish.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the things I love about the Bay Area and why I'll never leave is, like, I live in what would be considered the boondocks, but I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere, but I can go 5 minutes and get sumac and za'atar if I want to. It's easy for me. So I love that about here. It's so much different than living like in Idaho, where you have to travel 3 hours to get it.
Right, or order it online. Yeah. No, that's another thing. There's some just amazing. I'm kind of a geek for grocery stores, and especially, culturally specific grocery stores, that have Middle Eastern ingredients, Indian ingredients. I mean, I found hole in the walls that specialize in like ingredient, that have products that have come from Russia. I mean, put me in the middle of a grocery store like that and just let me roam up and down the aisles, and I am a very, very happy person.
I'm exactly the same way. I think it drives my wife nuts because she hates shopping and I love it. So I'll go. I'm the one that likes to go grocery shopping, and she's happy to stay home and let me do it.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm the geek. I'm the grocery store geek in our house.
Too. Some of your who are some of your favorite cookbook authors and food writers that you're reading that you enjoy reading?
Oh, so that's really hard to narrow down. I, as we alluded to earlier, I'm obviously a huge fan of Yotam Ottolenghi and also Sammy Tamimi. I love their storytelling and the ingredients they use and the flavors they create. I've been making Sammy Tamimi and Tara Wigley's recipe for something called shata, which is a Palestinian pepper spice sauce thing, condiment's the word I'm looking for. It's so simple, but it's otherworldly by the time you're done with it. It's amazing. So I'm loving that. I love all of their books. I love a new book that just came out by Emily Pastor on Mediterranean cooking, but in the Instant Pot. And I
Ooh,
love it, and some air fryer. The recipe flavor profiles are amazing. The photography is amazing by Leigh Olson. So definitely I would take a look at that. I, of course, love Dory Greenspan. I love the way when you read her recipes, you feel like she's in the kitchen with you. I really admire the way she writes her recipes. It just is, I feel like you're together when you read, you're with her when you read her recipes.
absolutely.
Yeah, I love Nick Sharma's work, Season, and then what's Flavor, what's his latest book, Flavor, I should
Oh,
know this.
I should know it too.
Is it Flavor Quotient? Is it Flavor? I should know this. Anyhow, both of his books, I love the way he takes traditional, he started, really like he'll often use flavor profiles, ingredients, for example, from Indian cuisine, but I see him, adding in his own flair. I love the way he creates his flavors and stretches the boundaries of things. And of course, this photography is absolutely amazing. I also love someone she's not writing her blog anymore, but Cheryl Sternman Rule. If you find either of her cookbooks, Ripe or Yogurt Culture, and if I don't think it's online anymore, but her blog, the 5 Second Rule, her food writing is phenomenal. I would always read what she wrote and it would inspire me. So if you find her cookbooks or find any of her writing online, really, really amazing writer. So those are a few. I mean, I could keep going. And I know people on blogs these days really want to get straight to the recipes, but there's some amazing, amazing storytelling. Oh, I know somebody else. I would check out Viola Buitoni. She doesn't have a blog, but her Instagram feed is inspiring. She's focused on Italian ingredients, Italy by ingredient. She's just, and check out her videos, just super, and she loves what she does. She's inspired by food and she will inspire you to get in the kitchen and be just as excited about it as she is. So that's another one.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I think about a lot is that when I write recipes, I like to put a lot of info before them, and I usually include like backstories or biography stuff. And I like to read that kind of thing. And I know there's a lot of people on social media that are like, just put the recipe, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, I, I don't agree. I like to read like where the cook came from and, and find out more about them. I really live for that part of it.
Well, and they talk a lot about, there's been a lot of discussion on all over online and various places about cultural appropriation in, food and recipes. And I think it's important, if you don't want to do that, but you're, cooking something that is maybe not your first, your background, that you need to spend some time talking about where the dish is from, what inspired you for the recipe, what the ingredients are. I feel like it's important. I mean, people can hit the jump to recipe button for sure, but I I like to understand that background. I mean, that's something that's really important to me. And I think it, it might influence you going forward from making that recipe to know, to explore more into that particular ingredient or cuisine. So I like the background of it too.
Yeah, I think
I'm with you.
I really like that you said that, because I mean, I always worry about cultural appropriation when I write a lot of articles about different food, but I always do like to include that I make this for my family. I grew up eating this. It's not something that's alien to my culture. So
Well, and then, I think a lot about what is, when you say what's, something's, alien to your culture, like think about like a family like mine and so many families in this country who have kids who are now of, what is their cult, like what is my
Right.
kids' culture, right? Like, and that's really important to me that I help them know that, but they're very diametrically opposite things, although I do try, or not opposite, they're just very different. There's, and they don't necessarily naturally cross over. But I was in an event once I'm in the Bay Area Jewish food professional group, and we did a Jew Asian event. And the woman who runs it, Alex Wall, asked me to be one of the featured chefs, cooks that night. And so I had to come up with a dish that was a representation of both my, my Jewish side and the Asian influence in my family, the Korean influence. So I came up with something called Ju Mandu. And
oh my God, I like it.
so mandu is a Korean dumpling, but I use like a kreplach filling. So my idea was kind of like that kreplach is this dumpling of the Jews, and then the mandu is the dumpling of the, my husband's Korean and Hawaiian side. So I kind of merged those two things, called it Ju Mandu.
Do you have any favorite music you like to listen to when you're baking in the kitchen?
Well, yeah. So I've been listening to a lot of Hawaiian music.
Oh, nice.
Especially over the last year, because it's very relaxing to me. We couldn't travel and all that. I tried to think about what would relax me, like when do I feel the most calm? And I always, when I get off a plane and breathe in the air of Hawaii, the tropical air, it's like I feel like my blood pressure immediately goes down, and I sort of get this feeling of relaxation. So I've been listening to a lot of Hawaiian music. I will be honest. It's not the only thing I listen to, but when you pull up my Spotify now, it's like, at the top, I always have my Hawaiian music list because I listen to it so much. It just has really helped me kind of, take deep breaths and relax through the pandemic and all the work on the book, and just, feeling kind of like, stressed out a lot. It's very relaxing.
Well, Beth, I want to thank you for being on the show. I've really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Dean. And I am so glad you asked me to be here, and love chatting with you today.
That was my conversation with author Beth Lee. You can check out her website, OMG Yummy, and our link to the Essential Jewish Baking book in the bio. Tomorrow, we're going to have author Faith Kramer on our podcast as a rebroadcast of her episode where I got to talk to her one-on-one about her book, 52 Shabbats. She'll be on tomorrow. And then later in this week, we'll have more authors. We're going to have on Thursday, we're going to have Kim Kushner of Modern Table talking about kosher food and Jewish cuisine. And then on Friday, we're going to listen to CEO of Boychik Bagels, Emily Winston, talk about her company and making the perfect bagel. So I'm hoping that you're all enjoying this wonderful Hanukkah week, and I hope that these episodes are as special to you as they are to me. I hope you have a really wonderful holiday if you celebrate Hanukkah, and have a great week of cooking and sharing with your family. Keep cooking.